I'll shut up, Michael.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this latest in our webinars from the International Society of Chief Data Officers on how CDOs succeed. I'll take 2 minutes of the time just to talk about the society, if you're not a member, to tell you about the sort of things we offer, apart from webinars of this quality and this capability. We have a society to promote a mission that looks at promotion of data literacy, leadership development, advancing the profession, reducing redundant work, and cooperation and coordination. So it's about helping data leaders, chief data officers, become better at what they're doing. We're setting up we have a global network which we have set up that perhaps has fallen into the sort of slight abeyance because of COVID, but is re-emerging like a phoenix from the ashes, and expect to have local leaders setting up local meets in your area so that chief data officers, data leaders can talk to each other, can learn from each other, do their jobs better. And that is also why we are doing webinars such as this, because it goes to the point that chief data officers come from a variety of backgrounds. They can't know everything. What they need to know across a range of parts of the range of the subjects that they cover is just enormous. And if you read chief data officer job specs, it's even wider still. So what we've got is one of what Peter will tell you about is one of the experts on data governance to take us on and to help us develop that learning, that knowledge sharing, that is fundamental to our mission. Peter.
Thanks, Michael. Again, I'm sure he'd also urge you to visit our website for future details and upcoming programs, but it's my pleasure now to welcome my friend and colleague, Nicola Askham, who I have known for a number of years. Nicola has made a very strong name for herself as the data governance coach, and just it's in her personality to be helpful in this area. So literally you can go to her website and click on the thing that says ask Nicola a question, and she can book you an answer on that. But what we've asked her here today to talk about is this position that Michael was describing, the chief data officer, being rather new. And so one of the things we always tell the chief data officers as they're getting started is they have to head up the data governance organization. And sometimes that's the first time they've heard about data governance. So from that kind of a range to some of the clients that you've dealt with over the years, Nicola, in terms of the various professional and other types of organizations that you've worked with that have very detailed data governance programs. It's kind of an interesting spectrum. What is it we're going to tell these organizations at this point where we're headed?
Oh, nice. That's a very good question. Well, hopefully, when I finish the webinar, you'll be clear. But you're allowed to ask extra questions at the MP. So
it's so good to have you with us.
Let me start sharing my screen. And if I go to full screen, hopefully you can see that okay. So thank you for the very kind introduction. I always feel like you're talking about somebody else when people say that, but for anybody that's listening in who hasn't come across me before, I just love my job. I'm really lucky. I've been able to work in many different sectors, helping numerous organizations implement data governance for over 18 years, and during that time I realized that doing data governance for other organizations was not necessarily the best thing for them in the long run, which was probably a bit of a difficult thing to realize when I actually worked for a consultancy as opposed to myself. But since working for myself, which I've done for a number of years now, I've developed an approach that ensures that my clients get the skills and knowledge they need to support their own data governance initiatives, using a mixture of training and coaching and consulting. And I think, you know, as I said, I love my job. I'm very passionate about it. And you'll see when Pete shared that bit from my website, I say I'm very passionate about data governance. And I have made it my mission to help as many people as possible be successful with data governance. So that's why I love being invited to do webinars like this, because I can get the message out to more people. And if those of you listening just glean one thing that helps you move forwards and makes your data governance initiative more successful, then that's a good thing. I count that as a big tick, and I've helped move on and help some more people. So that's really, really great. So I will admit now, I am not going to do like data governance 101. I'm going to make a big assumption that you do know what data governance is, because we only have like 45 minutes in this session, and I didn't want to spend it telling you stuff you can find online. You know, if this is perhaps, as Michael was saying, perhaps this is the, you know, you got the CDO role and it was the first time you'd heard of data governance. There's loads of free resources on my website. I have a YouTube channel where you can go and see what data governance is. So I'd encourage you to go and investigate them. But what I wanted to do is look at it through the eyes of a CDO. Not the, you know, quite often I'm training and supporting the data governance manager, the data governance lead, the person who is responsible for actually doing the data governance, but they always need somebody senior supporting them and sponsoring them. And back when I first started doing this, the role of chief data officer didn't exist. And, you know, I just looked for anybody that was happy to support me. I think, you know, if there's a CDO in place, what Peter said is absolutely spot on. The CDO must head up the data governance organization and must be the one really promoting that. And with that kind of viewpoint, that's what I wanted to share with you, what we're doing, what you should be doing and knowing about data governance. Now, I have a quick question for you though. I'd like to know, always kind of trying to test the waters on how people are feeling about data governance. So this is a bit interactive. I need you to type in the chat. On this sheep scale that you can see in front of you, how are you feeling today? So if you could just type that in the chat, let me know that you're actually there and listening to me, that would be good. Personally, I will hold my hand up and tell you I'm at a number 9, because as I probably already given the impression, I'm really excited about the chance to tell more people about data governance and to help you be more successful. So this is great. So we've had 1 9, there's somebody else like me and Robert as well. Great. So thank you all very much for joining in. That's really, really helpful. So it's great to know that I'm talking to people who are as excited about data governance as me. So let's get on to the more serious stuff. And now I was going to say, for some reason, my screen didn't progress. Let's hope that doesn't continue. And I've just got a number of themes, and I've tried to put them in a logical order. And the first one I wanted to talk to you about was consider outcomes. Now, I think when people first start data governance, and I will hold my hand up here and say this was definitely me in the early days of doing data governance, they're too busy talking about what data governance is, and the roles and responsibilities and the policy and the processes. And most people you'll talk to, their eyes will glaze over. They are already busy, probably too busy. They have a day job, and they're just not interested in the what data governance is. What they are interested is what you're going to get out of it. So what I need to say to you is, do not talk to anybody in your organization about data governance in terms of it being best practice, or perhaps you met another CDO at perhaps it was a virtual networking event and they told you they were doing data governance. You thought, oh, we ought to do that. Those are not good reasons for your organization to be doing data governance. You've got to work out what's in it for your organization. Why are you doing it? Are you trying to address inefficiencies? Perhaps some part of the organization is embracing, you know, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and your data is just not good enough, or you don't actually even understand what data you've got. Those are good reasons. Just doing it because you feel like you ought to, definitely not a good one at all. So when you're coming to talk about data governance and, you know, identifying the drivers for your data governance initiative, I think you've got to say, why are you doing it for your organization? What outcomes are you hoping to get? And particularly as a senior stakeholder, as a CDO, I'd expect you to be talking to other senior stakeholders about data governance. And when you do, they're not interested in the what. They're interested in what's in it for them. And you need to be able to answer that question. And that may well be different depending on who you're talking to. So your answer may well be very different for the finance director as it would be for the marketing director. So always bear that in mind. And just think about, why are you doing this? And worry less about the what it is, because you're a CDO. You don't have to worry about all the details. Now, I would expect you to know some, but you're going to have a data governance manager, a data governance lead that can then follow up these initial meetings that you do to start going into the detail. But people are not interested in the what of data governance. Believe me, I've tried, and it doesn't matter how much passion, energy, enthusiasm I throw at it. They're just not interested. You start telling them what they'll get out of it, people suddenly sit up and start saying, we want this, or we want more of this. That is what you're aiming for. Now, the next one that I have wanted to talk to you about is alignment of strategies. Now, you might be going, well, what's that mean? What strategies? So I think, I'm sure you'd agree that everybody seems to have a data strategy these days. They are so trendy. And that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. But some data strategies are better than others, I would say. Not all data strategies are equal. And I think it's fair to say that I have seen some that are, somebody's gone on perhaps onto Dharma or Dama, depending where in the world you are, onto the body of knowledge, and they've just listed all the different data management capabilities, and their strategy just says we're going to do all of these. And it's not really understanding, why you're doing it, which is going back to the previous theme. So I always say you've got to start with your corporate strategy. What is your organization trying to do and achieve? So if in your corporate strategy, you have some business objectives that say about reducing costs, increasing profit, perhaps entering new markets, you need to look at whether your data is good enough to facilitate or support those objectives. And if it's not, that is what needs to be in your data strategy. And your data governance approach needs to focus on the most critical data to deliver what it is your company is focusing on. Now, this one I learned the hard way at the very beginning of my data governance career, because I definitely was doing everything I told you on the last slide not to do. I was talking about it being best practice and we should do it. And I totally ignored the corporate strategy. And nobody would do it. I was talking to some really senior stakeholders who were telling me that they had other things they had to prioritize and focus. So they're part of delivering the corporate strategy. And they weren't interested in somebody who was trying to be really energetically convincing them that they should worry about this data thing, because there was nothing in it for them. But if you can go and talk to people and say, so you're tasked with reducing cost. Did you know how much money we waste through inefficiencies, through rework, or because of our data being poor quality? Then you've aligned your strategies, and this is really, really key. Because if you don't do that, you're almost like doing data governance for the fun of it, and it won't last. Because everybody else is on a very clear agenda, and you need to make sure that everything you're doing is aligned with that corporate strategy. So now I've done my piece about strategies. I wanted to talk to you about the fact that data governance is, I'm now thinking, as soon as I've seen this image, I should have put it is about culture more than technology, but never mind, let's say it's as much about culture as it is technology. People think that data is on systems, so therefore data governance must be an IT thing. It must all be about the tools and the technology, and it's just not. Yes, there are tools that you can use, but it's the people that are actually really important, particularly in the early phases of a data governance initiative. This is about getting into people's mind and getting them to change their mindset to start thinking about their data. Thinking about it full stop would probably be a good start, and actually understanding that it has value, that it is an asset for your organization. And I think before organizations have perhaps started implementing data governance, quite often there is this perception amongst probably not all employees, but perhaps most employees, that data is almost like a necessary evil or an inconvenience that's just part of doing their job. We need to change that. We need people to understand that this data is an asset and it should be managed as such. And therefore, we've got a huge amount of work to do on the culture side of things before we get to the data, long before we get to the technology side of things. And I think people always want to go to the things that they feel comfortable with. People understand that we can put technology in and make things better. And that's true. I'm not going to argue against that. But if you do it in the wrong order, it's not going to help you when it comes to data governance. Culture is absolutely key, and you need to really bear that in mind. So, wanted to just obviously make the point. You have got to think about the data as being separate to any database or system that it's on. And, I even do that when I'm creating conceptual data models or data maps, I sometimes call them, for my clients. And I say to them, what data do you use and produce in your department? And people will always say, oh, well, can we draw a box that says the data on system X? And I'll go, no, you can't. And they always look at me a bit put out. And I go, because system X is the current system. But there was another system before system X. And in a few years' time, system X will be replaced by system Y or Z. And this will be out of date, but the data will be the same. So what data is on system X? And they'll start saying, oh, well, we've got some customer data, a little bit of staff data, but we've got no product data. That's on another system. And you're great. Well, when I'm talking about data and I'm talking about data governance, I want to know the data. I don't want to know the system names. Obviously, at some point, when I'm developing my data glossary and starting to document things, yes, absolutely, I want to know that we have customer data and most of it's held on system X. But I need to break that link initially. And you do too. You need to get people thinking about data in its own right, that it's not something that's always attached to a system. And that will help your business users achieve this culture change, get their head around the fact that data itself has some value. Now, one thing that I quite often say to my clients is that, this is a bit of a difficult one now, given that most people haven't been into offices much the last 18 months, but nearly every organization I've ever worked with has a facilities or a maintenance team or department of some kind, and they're responsible for your office buildings. And everybody understands in the company that your office buildings are an asset. They're a valuable asset that belongs to your organization. And as such, you have a specialist team called facilities that will maintain them. Now, they don't do what most organizations have done with data in the past and wait for your office to fall down before they do something. They have regular checks. They come around and check the sprinkler system, the fire alarms. They go around and check the lights, and they check that no ceiling tiles are cracked. They don't wait for it to fall into disrepair. But unfortunately, that's what we do an awful lot before we start embracing data governance. So I really like to think not on databases that data's on, or any of the myriad of data governance, data analytics, data quality tools that are out there. They are really, really useful, but we need to get people understanding that data itself exists separate to all of these things and has some value. So I suppose to sum up what I'm trying to say is, data governance tools, all tools are obviously very good and very valuable, but get data governance sorted first, get the mindset change moving. Part of achieving that mindset change is achieving some data literacy within your organization. And I came across this quote on LinkedIn a few weeks ago where somebody said data literacy is a path to empower people. And I thought, that's fabulous. That is a really good way of summing it up. And this really does change what I'd said a couple of slides ago about, data being a necessary evil, to people suddenly going, this is really useful stuff, and this is wrong, and we need to get it changed. And it starts changing that mindset amongst people, because I think it's fair to say that without data governance, most organizations will probably have a very small number of people who truly get what data is and that its value. And they're probably the people on your BI or MI team. There may be one or two others dotted around your organization, but everybody else isn't understanding that because they're not data literate. And I want to ask you as a CDO, what opportunities do you think you're missing in your organization because only a select few people truly understand data and get it, that it's an asset? Now, Gartner promotes data and information as the second language of business, but yet, research shows that business leaders are still struggling to understand and work with data themselves, and that's leading to this deficiency in people having the data literacy, the confidence to work with data. And I think perhaps I don't think I'm overstepping it to say that employees without data literacy skills are performing suboptimally. How many inefficiencies are they making because they don't understand that perhaps poor quality data is at the behind some of the broken processes or manual workarounds that they do, or how many wrong decisions are being made. Now, that is something that is really, really real. I worked with a client a few years ago who closed down a whole department of their business, believing that it wasn't profitable. They found out after it had been closed, people had been made redundant, that actually the data they'd been given to make that data was not incorrect, but was not calculated on the basis that the decision makers thought it was. So, wouldn't it be better to make decisions on trusted, correct data? It feels to me, and I think it's a few years back now, but a Gartner annual Chief Data Officer survey cited poor data literacy as one of the main roadblocks to a CDO's success and a company's ability to grow. And, I noticed, of course, when Michael was doing the introduction at the beginning, that you have improving data literacy as one of the aims of your society. And, that's fabulous. I think that is spot on. And, I don't think I need to say any more on that one, but, it really is a key thing. And it's vital to address. You can't just do data governance and think that the data literacy will follow. They have to go hand in hand as part of the whole approach. Now, this slide comes out of my very strong belief that data governance is not a project. Now, let me just repeat that again, just in case there's any doubt about this. Data governance is not a project. It's, you could call it a journey, or it's an ongoing activity, but this is definitely not something that we do once and we finish and we walk away and everybody can go back to how they were doing it before. So I would rather that you considered maybe change management rather than data governance, rather than project management. So that is why I've got here that, this isn't a project. So we can't be talking about timings and dates and budgets to be set in stone. Now, absolutely, I think you do need to have some kind of plan when you're implementing data governance, because if you don't, you're going to end up, well, nobody doing much really, because you've got no deadlines to aim for. There's no consequences of not achieving those deadlines. So what I always like to say is that, yes, you should have these things, but this is not a project. So don't have a project mindset. I've worked with clients who have taken this kind of project mindset and one, sadly, halfway through, because they decided they wanted to speed it up by giving me extra resource to help. And I said, fabulous. When I next went on to kind of went along to see how they were doing, the project manager had de-scoped things so that they could deliver on time and to budget. And, I was thinking, well, hang on a minute, that was not useful resource to get, because data governance is not about de-scoping things. It's all about, focusing on what's valuable and what's useful to your organization. So please don't manage it as a project. It leads to the wrong decisions being made and the wrong focus. So yeah, I think this is a difficult one, particularly in your position. So, your boss tells you that you should be doing data governance and you say, yes, absolutely, we're working on it. And they say to you, well, when are you going to do it? How much are you going to spend on it? And what benefits are you going to deliver? And I can't give you the answers, I'm afraid. And I have stood in front of so many senior stakeholders over the years saying, I can promise you that I will deliver benefits and there will be, a lot of value from implementing data governance. But right at the start of the initiative, I don't know when that will be. And I also don't know what that will be, because until we start doing data governance, we don't actually uncover the errors, the mistakes, the inefficiencies, the manual workarounds to be able to fix them. So it's not like your usual project. Well, as I kind of made a point of it, it's not a project at all, but you can't say, we're doing this and we're going to save 10 FTE or I don't know, £1 million in 5 years, because you just don't know at the start. If you do data governance properly, I can guarantee that you will save money, you will solve some problems, but at the start, you just won't know what they are. So you know, not that I want to worry you, but just bear that in mind when you're talking about data governance. So the next one is probably or definitely carrying on from the theme before. Yes, it's not a project. I think I may have mentioned that once or twice, but just want to make sure that that message got through. But it's for life. It's not just for Christmas. So this is picking up on the, that dog is for life, not for Christmas. Data governance is for life as well. We're not doing this as a one-off. This isn't a project that gets repeated every 5 years. This is something that we bake into the culture of our organization, that everybody knows their role and their responsibility towards data, and they take it seriously. So we've got to start thinking about using proper change management techniques when we're implementing data governance. And we've got to think about this as very much being a journey. Now, one of my coaching clients a couple of years ago was fabulous at coming up with analogies, and I borrow quite a lot of them quite frequently. And one that I told him one coaching call was that, quite loads of people talk about data governance being a marathon and not a sprint. But I'm not sure I like that, because a marathon still has an end. It just takes a bit longer to get there than a sprint, but it does have an end, as do projects. And we're just, trying to make the point that it's not having an end. So, I didn't think that analogy worked very well. And knowing how good Ed was at doing analogies, I told him my frustrations with that one. And he said, well, surely it's a bit like the diet pill versus the personal trainer. And I was going, oh, okay, tell me more, Ed. And he was saying that, with all things, data governance, our health, our weight, we want a quick fix. Human beings are naturally, lazy seems a harsh word, but we like things to be done quickly and easily. And some things just aren't quick and easy, like getting fit and losing weight. And so many people spend a lot of money and a lot of time searching for that elusive magic diet pill that you can just take that pill and then magically you shed those unwanted pounds, you're super fit and healthy, and you can live happily ever after. Now, we know that doesn't happen. And we know that the only way to really do that is a lifestyle change, and we're going to have to change our diet. We're probably going to have to work with a personal trainer, but these aren't projects. We might be a little bit more intensive with them in the first few phases, which is exactly what you would do with data governance. But if we give up any of those things, we will go back to being overweight and unfit and unhealthy. And we have to take that same mindset with data governance. This isn't a one-off. This is why it is really, really important when you're doing data governance to consider who's going to be supporting this going forwards. Because quite often organizations get consultants in or contractors to help give you extra resource in the initial phases. And that's a great thing, but you also need to be thinking all the way along, who are we handing this over to? Shouldn't they be here really early so that they actually understand the framework, have had a part in it? So really think, I'm going to say long term, it's not even long term, think forever. Data governance should be becoming just one of the many functions that exist in your organization, be like IT, HR, finance. Nobody says, when are we going to close down finance? When are we going to close down HR? Data governance should be of that kind of ilk, that you will always have a data governance team or person, depending on the size of your organization, and they're going to be there supporting this. And it's really important that you consider that and plan for that. So now, I was going through some notes from a conference I went to, I think it was 12 years ago. I found them when I was looking for something else a few weeks ago. And I had written down something that a speaker had said, and I will apologize because I couldn't even read his name from my scribbles. But he'd said, think big, start small, and deliver value. He wasn't actually talking about data governance at the time, but I read it in my notes and just thought, wow, that is exactly what I try to tell people to do for data governance, but nowhere near so succinctly. So I thought I just had to use this for this presentation. And I think this is exactly, it sums up perfectly what we need to be doing when we're thinking about data governance. So we definitely need to be thinking big picture. There is no point saying we're just going to do data governance over this tiny wee little bit of data in this corner and then hope that everything will be right. We need to be planning to do it over everything, but equally, you can't do everything. So in the early days, I would bounce into senior stakeholders' offices, and I would be telling them that we need to do data governance, made all the mistakes I've already told you about, but I'd also be describing this really complicated, big framework, loads of activities, loads of deliverables. And I would be doing it for best practice. So I was definitely thinking big. I didn't start small. I wanted to start big, and I wasn't really explaining how I was going to deliver value. I just wanted to do it to get it right. And you know, it was oh, somebody's put in there. It was Dr. Richard Wang who made that. Thank you. I shall write that down so I can contribute to him in future. And you know, this is just, it's perfect saying for data governance. So you do need to think big, but you shouldn't necessarily share everything with everybody. But you need to be delivering value, and you need to do something that is deliverable and doable. So I was bouncing into people's offices, and I was painting a picture that sounded really, really complicated, and they didn't understand what was in it for them. So it's no big surprise now, with the benefit of hindsight, that I was politely declined the offer to do data governance. And people go, no, thanks, Nicola, go and do it for somebody else. We don't think we need this here. And, you know, I'd been working at this bank for many years by that time, not doing data governance, but I'd seen the light and I couldn't understand why nobody came with me. But it took me a few years of working for a consultancy to actually get my head around this. And, you know, you suddenly start seeing that, yes, that's what we need to do. You need to think the big picture. You need to understand what your target is and what you're aiming for. But don't share it with everybody up front. You'll just scare them. One of the a Swedish consultant I worked with many years ago had a really good way of saying it. When I overshared my plans with a client and they looked a bit worried at a meeting. And he said to me afterwards, Nicola, you have to remember, we're taking over the world one attribute at a time. You mustn't tell everybody the master plan, because otherwise they'll get scared. And I think this is really, really true. So have a view. You know what you're aiming for. You know your target state. What do you want to get out of data governance? How far is the scope going to be? Don't share that with everybody. Only share them what you need to at any one time. Choose what you're going to do to start small. So whether you want to call that a pilot or you're just having a phased iterative rollout, it's it is really important that you do things in bite-sized chunks when you're doing data governance. Whenever I say that, that reminds me of about the one joke I can remember from my childhood, which is, how do you eat an elephant? And that's in bite-sized chunks. And data governance is the same. We have to start small. And it's absolutely critical that we deliver value, because if we don't deliver value, what was the point in doing it? That means we've ignored the very first thing I said at the beginning of the webinar about, considering outcomes. We're not doing this for fun. We're not doing this for best practice. We're doing this to deliver real value. So make sure that, I would love to say everything you do when you're doing data governance is delivering value. I think that's possibly tricky, because I think in the early phases, particularly when you're doing things like documenting conceptual data models, building data glossaries, there's no immediate value, but they will deliver value in the long term. But so whilst you're doing all them, make sure you're solving some data quality issues, making sure you're really delivering some real value whilst you're actually working on implementing some of the perhaps more time consuming, and some people, not me, but some people have been known to call it the onerous part of data governance, those early phases. But find some data quality issues to solve while you're doing it, so that people can start understanding what you're doing, that you are adding value, and that the more you do of this other foundational work, the more value will be realized in the future. So I think this has probably become clear about what I was saying over the last slide, but I think it is really important not to overcomplicate data governance. Absolutely, I did that in the first few years. I wanted to try and think of every eventuality and cover for it. And you just make it too hard to implement. Over the years, I've actually gone and helped organizations where they've had one of the big four consultancies in to do data governance for them. And they've left them with a 100-page PowerPoint of a very complicated data governance framework that nobody can understand. So they've employed me to come along and look at it and review it and tell them how to implement it. And, you know, and I've been reading it going, well, I don't see how this would ever work, because nobody's going to get their head around it. And if the data governance team can't get their head around it, how are the business users going to get their head around it? So I always say, you know, don't complicate it, simplify it. If anything, I'd rather that you oversimplify things, because you can always add detail later. So you start with a very simple approach, a very simple framework of roles and responsibilities. And then perhaps 6 months down the line, something comes up which illustrates why that's not working in a certain set of circumstances. That is the time to tweak it, to add more detail. So one example with that is, on the vast majority of my clients, and probably for most organizations this is true, I think having just 2 levels of data ownership is perfect. You have your senior stakeholders who are the data owners, who are accountable for data, and they are supported by 1 or more data stewards. And for most organization, that works really, really well. However, there are some organizations where there's some data that we really can't find one person who should be the data owner. And we've got to find a way of managing that. And there's a couple of different approaches that I've used successfully over the years to do that. But I don't start with them. Because if you started saying, well, and some data is going to fit into this model and some data is going to fit into this model, people are going to go, well, why? I don't get it. They're still trying to get their heads around data ownership, full stop. So, you know, try with everything data governance, go with a simple approach first. And if it doesn't work, then add a little bit more detail, a little bit more complexity, so that you can deliver what is needed for your organization. But don't start off complicated, because as you've already hopefully got the message, this is so much about the culture, the people, the data literacy. We don't want to blow people's minds. Data governance, designing a data governance framework is not an exercise in how clever can I be and show you all these wonderful things I can do. It's about doing something that is the easiest way to deliver value for your organization. And I think that's a really good thing to bear in mind when all things data governance and all the decisions you're making about it. So finally, I wanted just to touch on what your job as a CDO is, because I said at the start, you're likely to have a data governance manager. You might be lucky enough to have a data governance team that you can just trust to go away and do everything on data governance for you. But as a CDO, your job is to be the main salesperson, the person who's out there championing data governance. And in the terms that I've described throughout this presentation, you know, what's in it for them, for the people, you know, what value are you going to bring, bringing people with you so that you can get into the hearts and the minds of the people, so that people are actually coming to you as the CDO and saying, can we speed up the data governance initiative? You know, it's we heard what you were saying at, you know, that meeting last week about, you know, finance saving £100,000. You know, could we have some of that? Can you roll out data governance to our department next? That's when you know that you'll be doing your job really, really well. People are not interested in saying, well, can you come and sort out some data owners for us? Or can you come and get us to write a data glossary? That's work. That sounds like more work, more accountabilities. But if they're suddenly saying, well, you're going to save money, you're going to save time, we're going to be able to take advantage of opportunities because we understand and manage our data better. It's a totally different animal indeed. So, you know, I don't want you to think this is like being a used car salesman job. It's not at all. I think if you bear in mind everything that I've said in this presentation, you know the things to focus on. We're not trying to sell something to people they don't want. We're trying to identify every stakeholder we talk to, what's in it for them, what benefits will they get from having data governance in their department, and then we can explain that to them. I don't like sales. I left the second consultancy that I worked for. One of the reasons was that I was told that in the next 3 months I was going to get promoted to senior consultant. And with that came a sales target to get new business. And that absolutely horrified me. I hate selling. I absolutely abhor it, and I'd like run for miles rather than sell. But I'm really, really happy to go around organizations telling people why they need data governance, which is selling. Funny that, isn't it? It's, you know, it really is important to have that passion and understand the value that data governance is going to bring, and then share that with your organization. You will be supporting your data governance team no end to do that. And that is something that you really can do in your position. So let's kind of come to the end of the themes that I wanted to share with you. And we've got roughly about the right amount of time to talk to you. I did want to say, I do have a free report on my website, which is the 9 biggest mistakes that companies make when implementing data governance. So if you've not come across me and read that before, I'd please feel free, go and download that and have a read. Feel free to connect with me on any of the platforms that you see there. You've probably noticed that I love talking about data governance. And if I can help anybody just to progress things by answering a silly question or whatever, that's fine. I do regular videos called Ask the Data Governance Coach videos. So it may be that you think it's a silly question, but you might ask me a question that is the topic for my next video. So, because if you're asking it, the chances are loads of other people are too. So definitely feel free to connect with me. And we have left some time at the end for questions. So
Nicola, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. It was just fabulous working through all of those various topics, and hopefully we've expanded the aperture of what people are thinking about when they think about what a CDO should do from a data governance perspective. So I want to thank you from that perspective for starters. We do have a couple of questions. Do you want to jump right in?
Yeah, go for it.
Great. Well, the first one's from Robert, and it's, how would you describe what data literacy is to a data immature organization?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yes, because I think if you just go saying we need to be more data literate, people are just going to look at you blankly. So I think it's all about explaining that, getting people to understand that the data that they are perhaps capturing as part of their job or using as part of their job has an intrinsic value, and that they need to understand really what that data is. And I think when you look at online, quite a lot of data literacy definitions will talk about the ability to analyze data. And I always think that sounds a bit overkill. And I think that would scare people if you were in a data immature organization. So it's not that we want every person in the organization to be analyzing data. We just want them to have the confidence to understand what data is, that this stuff that they're putting into systems all the day or they're printing reports off is data, and that it's valuable, and to start thinking about it and asking questions about it. And in a data immature organization, I think that's good enough start, because we just want people to have that confidence to say, the numbers that came through this week were different than last week by quite a lot, and I wondered if that's something we should look into. That is a huge step forward from somebody just going, well, here's this week's numbers. So I always try and just explain to people that it's about thinking about it and the impact of it. So the other thing I would do is find what I like to call my data quality horror stories. So try and find out things that have gone wrong in your organization because of poor quality data or the wrong data being used. So like my example of an organization closing one of its departments down. Perhaps you don't have anything quite so bad as that, but you could find some examples of time being wasted, perhaps customer complaints, because people didn't understand that data was important. And those kind of real examples really help people get their head around why they need to think about data literacy. So I hope that helps.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. Another question could be around KPIs, and how should a CDO measure against KPIs, I guess, from a data governance perspective?
That's a good question. I think I did a video on that earlier in the year. It's really hard to do KPIs for data governance, because if you set a standard of a standard metric, you might not capture the value that you've delivered, because we don't necessarily know where that value is going to come. So you could do an amount of money saved or FTE time saved, but what if it was somewhere else, you know? And sometimes it's reputational, it's the number of complaints have gone down. So I find it really, really hard to set KPIs for data governance. I think in the early days, it's quite easier to kind of measure progress, so that you can say that we've now got 10 data owners identified, and 8 of them are trained, and 6 of them have nominated their data stewards. And, you know, you start kind of doing the progress and how many entries we've got in our data glossary, how many of them have been approved. But they're not really, they're just telling you progress of the implementation of it. And I think what you have to find is what is it that your company's interested in, and try and develop some KPIs around that. But KPIs for data governance are really, really tricky. So if anybody else has got some good examples, I'd be very happy to know them, because I'd love to share them with there's loads of people to try and help them. But
well, just since we're in the discussion at this point, right? So maybe one of the things I've been trying to get people to look at when they come up with that question is to say, how can you make data better support the existing KPIs that you have? Because if you don't have KPIs, that's a different question, right? Then you're sort of flying blind, or at least you're using some sort of different navigation. But if you've got KPIs, how can you take, and a governance responsibility would be making those KPIs faster, better, cheaper, more accurate, less risky, all the way around. How's that sound?
That sounds really great. And the one thing I like to do when I'm talking to senior stakeholders is say, but do you trust them? Do you believe that number? And people will go, oh yes, of course I do. And it was really brought home a few years ago. I was working with an insurer, and one of their key KPIs is called the loss ratio. So it's how much loss they're making from when people claim for car accidents and things. And through doing data governance, we discovered that there were actually 5 official ways of calculating loss ratio across the organization. There were about another 4 or 5 unofficial.
And they're all perfectly standard, right? Each one of them.
Exactly. And the CEO would sit there periodically and say, oh, I think I could do with an update on what the loss ratio is, please. And she was really under the impression that somebody went to a computer, pressed the big red button, and out popped the loss report, the loss ratio report. And actually, in real life, I think it was 5 different teams did a various number of calculations of it, then all got together in various meetings to argue and debate about whose number was better and right and why. And then they finally agreed what the final number was, they just put it in a report and sent it to her. And this is crazy. So, you know, you saying that is perfect, you know, making your data support your KPIs. And so that actually you as a senior stakeholder can actually trust that and make the right decisions based on that.
Well, I would go one step further. This is a little parlor trick that I use. It's based on Daniel Kahneman's latest book, which he has called Noise. And Nicole, it just describes exactly the concept that you just described. He said, go to a group of actuaries in your organization, a group of insurance underwriters, a group of professionals whose job it is to add their professional opinion. And noise is his level of the variance that comes out of their respective estimates. And it's turning out to be a bigger and bigger source of corporate risk error, because the same people, even though you'd think, you know, we both got 20 years in the profession, will probably do the same kind of thing, turns out to be not quite as close as all that, which again argues for the need to impose this type of governance in organizations, particularly around revenue driving activities, right?
Absolutely.
So Daniel Kahneman, Noise. Here's our next question. I'll get babbling on here and we'll miss out on this.
Add that to my book list.
It is a good one. It's really excellent. Can you discuss the relationship between data governance and enterprise data management? How are they related?
Oh, yeah, another good question. So the one I probably need to declare that I'm on the Dharma UK chapter, so chapter board. So I'm somewhat wedded to the Dharma approach.
I don't think they'll hold that against us.
So anybody who hasn't heard of it, I would encourage you to Google Dharma wheel, usually brings it up, and you'll get an image. It's a circular image broken up into segments, and it has loads of different data management disciplines around the outside, and you have data governance in the middle. Now, I like it because I'm somewhat biased to the value of data governance, and I think it puts data governance in the middle of everything. It's so important. Unfortunately, it causes a lot of confusion as well. So I think, the official stance, and I subscribe to it as well as Dharma, is that, everything on that DMBot wheel is data management, so enterprise data management. And enterprise data management is made up of a number of disciplines, including data modeling, data architecture, data warehousing, data integration and interoperability, I think it's called these days, data quality, master data management. These are all different data management disciplines. And most, I think fair to say all organizations need them. The degree to which they need them will differ depending on their size and their complexity. Now, data governance is in the center, not one of the segments. So lots of people think, does that mean that data governance is a term that can be used interchangeably with data management? And that wasn't the intention of it. So the reason data governance was put in there is not because as I believe it solves all problems and it's the center of the world. It's in the middle because data governance gives you this fabulous foundation for all other data management disciplines. And the main way it does that is through roles and responsibilities. You have this roles and responsibilities so that people know who to go to make decisions about data. Now, data governance and data quality are very closely wed, and I always argue that it's very hard to know when data governance ends and data quality starts. But some of the other disciplines it's not quite so closely wed to, but they still need that foundation of a data governance framework. So the example I can give you, many years ago, I was working with a client and their data security manager turned up at my desk. And I said, oh, nice to meet you. And but I'm not doing data security. I'm a data governance consultant. And he went, I know, it's great. And I went, no, you do know what data governance is? He goes, yes, I know what it is. We did it at my last organization. He said, it's really good. I want to be involved. And I went, but it's not data security. And I was kind of getting really bewildered. And, it turns out that this guy was wasting hours every day trying to find somebody in the business to make a decision about data. How it should be held, how secure, should it be encrypted, what level of encryption, etc. And nobody would answer because everybody else thought it was somebody else's problem. But he knew that once you've got data governance in place and we've identified somebody as being the data owner for that data, now I might have talked to them about owning it from a data quality point of view and understanding what that data is, but they're still the right person to make consistent decisions about that data. And so the data security manager was just desperate for me to sort the data owners out so that he could go around and talk, save hours every week just to get to somebody and say, Peter, you own this data, don't you? Can you just tell me what level of encryption does it need? And the data owners have kind of come with you on this journey, and they might not be experts in data security, but they understand that they are the right person to make consistent decisions about that data, regardless of which of the data management disciplines it's in respect of. So I hope that helps, and that little example kind of brings it to life a little bit.
If you don't know where it is, how are you going to secure it? So absolutely, it's a very close tie between the two functions within the organization, and the tying of the DIMBOX stuff together was probably better than we did in the book, so well done. I appreciate that, Nicola. Here we have a question from Joe. Are there useful generic models a la ISO 9000 for data governance approaches? Ooh. I think I would sort of see these as frameworks because there's sort of been several popular frameworks kicking around.
Yes. So are they useful? Oh, this is a really difficult question because I'd love for there to be a standard framework or generic model that works for everybody. But I haven't found one yet. So a client asked me to do a review against ISO 8061 a few years ago, and that was probably one of the better ones I've seen, but it still had virtually nothing on roles and responsibilities. So I would say they're probably used if you're just starting out, you've never seen data governance done before, you want to get your head around what it could look like. They might be useful as a reference thing, just something so you can understand what they are. But I think this is why I always say, I don't think data governance is a hard concept for people to get their head round. It's not rocket science. You don't need to be a brain surgeon. I don't count myself as all that intelligent. The difficulty with data governance is making it right for your organization. And I think that's why these generic or standard models then don't work, because people want to grasp them and just shoehorn them into their organization. And they haven't worked out that it's not right for their organization for some reason. Or the review I did against the ISO 8061, there were things in there that only an incredibly data mature organization would be doing. And this company was right at the beginning of their organization, and they were beating their data journey, and they were beating themselves up that they weren't doing that yet. And I was saying, but I wouldn't expect you to be doing this for 5 or 6 years yet. So I think they can be some value from them, but you take care, use them as a reference and give you some ideas of what's possible, and then take the time to work out what your organization needs, what's right for it at this moment in time. And remember that a data governance framework isn't set in stone, and it needs to evolve as your organization evolves. It might, you might acquire a new company, you might divest some business. I had one company that went from a very traditional hierarchical reporting structure to a matrix reporting structure. That prompted a change in the data governance framework. So a data governance framework it should never be set in stone. So I think the generic models might give you some ideas, but you definitely shouldn't feel that you should have to adhere to them or all of them.
And Nicola, that's been sort of your theme throughout the last hour that we've spent together, that data governance is a component of the chief data officer's responsibilities, but that responsibility is going to manifest itself depending on where the organization is on its current journey of maturity, its current journey in data, its current journey in process architectures. Lots and lots of different things are going to play into that overall space. And so I think the things that you've given us to think about here as a community are going to be very, very helpful, sort of organizing principles around questions to have, conversations that should occur. Am I representing your thoughts well in that context?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a brilliant way of summarizing it.
Great. Well, I certainly appreciate you coming on and joining us, and everybody for participating in this. We'll have our next webinar queued up to go in just a little bit on these. Looking forward to it, and I want to thank everybody for participating. Nicola, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. Folks, she really is serious about this. She loves to talk about this, as do we, and hopefully it comes across in her personality. But just head over to her website and click on a link, and you'll be in a conversation with her really, really quickly. Nicola, thank you so much. Have a happy rest of your day today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.